Frozen peas and silence. That's what dinner looked like last night. The tray rolled in at 5 sharp, chicken overcooked, mashed potatoes too smooth to be real, and peas. Always the peas. I stared at them for a long time, watching them cool in their own steam. No one said a word. The nurse smiled politely, but her eyes had somewhere else to be. And me, I just sat there, the fork in my hand, shaking slightly, from the weight of everything I'd carried to get here. They say the dining room is communal, but that only matters if someone wants to sit beside you. No one did. I was left with my peas, my memories, and the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. I used to feed an entire family, every single night. I used to stir soups while helping with math homework, roast chickens while folding laundry slice apples, while giving advice I never followed for myself, and I'd do it all again if it meant someone might sit with me now, even if just to complain about the peas. But instead, I watched the steam die down alone and remember the days I couldn't sit for more than 2 minutes without someone needing something, a refill, a missing sock, a hug. There was once a time when I thought that was love. All that doing, all that giving. I thought if I poured enough into them, they would never let me feel empty. But love, real love, doesn't leave you hungry. Not like this. Not with a tray of food no one cooked with you in mind. Not with a seat that never gets filled. The silence here is thick, but not cruel. It's just quiet, in that tired, indifferent way that loneliness tends to be. And sometimes in that quiet, I can hear echoes of laughter from long ago, the way the kids used to run through the kitchen leaving muddy footprints, the way my husband would complain about the salt, even though I always used just the right amount, the way I used to hum as I plated food like I was building something sacred out of onions and oil. But now I eat with plastic utensils. I count the bites like I used to count bills at the end of each week, hoping it would be enough. I chew slow. It's not because of my teeth. It's because there's nothing to rush for anymore. No one's coming. No one's asking, "Did you eat?" No one's noticing that I didn't. When you give your life away piece by piece for your children, your husband, your parents, you assume someone will gather those pieces and hold them like treasure. But mine were left scattered, forgotten. And now I sit at a table set for one, picking at peas I didn't ask for, remembering a time when I thought love would look like a full table forever. It's funny, isn't it? I made sure everyone else was fed. I dished out seconds even when I hadn't had firsts. I packed lunches with notes in them. I made birthday cakes from scratch. I kept food warm for hours waiting for late arrivals. And now my food gets cold before I take the first bite, because there's no one to wait for. No one worth waiting for. I used to think I'd die surrounded by family. I used to imagine my last days like a movie, soft music, warm hands, eyes that remembered me. But I never imagined this. A lukewarm tray, a room where the only sound is the ticking of a wall clock and the occasional cough down the hallway. I sacrificed everything so they could have better, and maybe they do. Maybe they have beautiful kitchens and warm meals and full houses, but none of those houses have a seat for me. Still, I eat slowly because I'm still here. And if I've learned anything, it's that even the smallest acts, lifting a fork, swallowing a bite, choosing to taste something instead of just enduring it, can be acts of defiance. I may be alone, but I am not invisible, not to myself, not anymore. The dinner that never ended. That's how I remember most of my life. One long, never-ending meal, where I was always on my feet, always at the stove, always the last to sit, if I sat at all. I can still hear the scraping of forks against plates, the calls from the living room, "Mom, where's the ketchup or honey?" or out of napkins as if I were a walking pantry. I was the refiller, the watcher, the one who made sure everyone had enough. But no one ever asked if I did. There's a strange ache that comes from being needed, but never noticed. From having your worth measured by how quickly you bring the salt, not by how much you're hurting inside. Every evening I'd watch them dig in their mouths full, their laughter spilling out, and I'd feel this quiet joy, this soft, fleeting warmth that maybe, just maybe, I was doing something right. But joy built on service alone is fragile. It breaks the moment you're no longer useful. Some nights I'd sit at the edge of the kitchen table, 1 foot still in the world of dishes and timers, the other trying to be part of the laughter, but I never quite belonged to either. My plate would be lukewarm by the time I got to it. Sometimes I wouldn't bother at all. I'd tell myself I wasn't hungry, but really I just didn't want to eat alone in a room full of people who didn't see me. It's a special kind of loneliness to be surrounded and starved at the same time. They were always so hungry, for food, for attention, for comfort. And I gave. I gave everything. I gave so much that I started to disappear behind the stove and the sink and the steady rhythm of chopping, stirring, serving. I gave until giving was the only language I knew. I forgot how to ask. I forgot how to receive. There was one night, I don't even remember what year, when I dropped a plate. It slipped from my hands, shattered on the tile. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Everyone froze. I expected someone to ask if I was okay. Instead, someone muttered, "Great. Now we have to eat off mismatched plates." And just like that, I became the mess to clean up, instead of the woman who had cooked the meal. I bent down, picked up the shards, and bled quietly into a paper towel while they ate. That moment never left me. It followed me through every pot I scrubbed, every late-night grocery run, every breakfast packed before dawn. I don't think they meant to be cruel. I think they were just used to me being the glue invisible, but expected to hold everything together. And glue doesn't complain when it's stretched too thin. It just cracks. Now when the aides bring me my dinner on a plastic tray, I think about how strange it is to have food handed to me instead of prepared by me. I don't like it. Not because it's bad, though it often is, but because it reminds me that I no longer have anyone to feed. The kitchen was my language, my battlefield, my offering. And now, that part of me is mute. I wonder if they ever remember those meals. The way I used to carve little apple bunnies for the kids' lunches. The way I always made everyone's eggs just the way they liked them, even when they all wanted something different. The roast that took 6 hours, the lasagna with 4 kinds of cheese, the soup that cured their colds. Do they remember? Or do they just think food magically appeared steaming and warm while they scrolled through their phones or laughed at sitcoms? There's no magic left in this place. Just portioned meals and low-sodium everything. But in my mind, I still measure garlic in pinches, still feel the weight of cast iron pans, still hum old songs as if I'm stirring rhythm into stew. Sometimes I close my eyes and pretend I'm still there back in my kitchen apron tied, heart open, waiting for someone to say, "Thanks, Mom," or even just, "This is good." But they rarely did. Maybe they thought I knew. Maybe I should have known. But a thank you would have tasted sweeter than any dessert I ever made. I think that's what hurts the most. Not the aching joints or the forgotten birthdays. It's the silence that followed all that love. The thankless void, the knowing that I gave so much, and now there's no one here to say it mattered. So now I eat slowly, like it's the first time I've been allowed to taste. I chew not for hunger, but to remember that I'm still here, that I still matter, even if the only one who notices is me. The birthday I scrubbed away. That's the one I remember more than any cake, any candle, any song. It was my 50th, a milestone they call it, a golden number. But there was no gold that day, just a toilet brush, a bottle of bleach and grout that wouldn't come clean no matter how hard I scrubbed. I remember crouching on the bathroom floor, the tile cool against my knees, scrubbing and scrubbing until my knuckles were raw. Somewhere in the house, laughter trickled in. They were getting ready to go out. Not for me, of course. Just a dinner they'd planned with friends. A weekend trip. Some excuse to escape. No one remembered the date. Or maybe they did, and just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't remind them. I told myself it wasn't important, that I'd celebrate later quietly with a slice of something sweet after the dishes were done. But I never did. I was too tired. And what would I be celebrating anyway? 50 years of fading into the background. There was a card from my sister unopened on the counter, a cheap one with glitter that stuck to my hands. I didn't read it until the next morning. She'd written, "I hope they do something special for you. You deserve it." I stared at that line for a long time. I think it was the first time in years someone said I deserved anything. Deserve. That word still catches in my throat. When you spend your life being useful, being reliable, being the one who always says, "Don't worry, I've got it," people stop thinking you deserve more than that. They think your joy is found in service, that your purpose is to enable theirs. But I was a person too. A woman who once liked wildflowers and jazz music and the way the city looked at night. A woman who had dreams that didn't involve laundry schedules or permission slips. I used to imagine what 50 would feel like. I thought maybe I'd have a little gathering, just the kids, a cake, maybe some photos from the past, strung up with ribbon. Nothing fancy, just a moment where someone saw me. But instead I got bleach under my nails and silence in my inbox. They texted later that week. One of them sent a meme. Another asked if I could watch the kids that weekend. I said yes. I always said yes. I didn't want to be petty, didn't want to make them feel bad. But inside something shifted. It was like a mirror cracked just slightly. I started to see myself the way they saw me, as someone who didn't need celebrating, as someone who could be skipped. And once you start seeing yourself through that lens, it's hard to undo it. I stopped expecting cards. I stopped baking my own favorite cake. I stopped even looking in the mirror on my birthday. What was there to see just the same woman who gave and scrubbed her own special day into the grout of a bathroom floor? Now birthdays come and go without fanfare. The staff here gives a cupcake sometimes. Once they sang. I smiled. I always smile. But inside it's just more of the same, that ache of being remembered by no one, not in the way that matters. Not as the woman who once made every birthday in our house, magical balloons before dawn, handmade banners, their favorite breakfast waiting. I made them feel like the world spun just for them. And now the world spins without even noticing I'm here. But I remember all of it. Not out of bitterness, not anymore, but because memory is the only place I still exist fully. And in those memories, I am not invisible. I am present, alive, creating joy from scratch. Even if no one said thank you, even if no one made me feel special, I know what I gave. I know what I built. I suppose that's something, maybe the only thing I have left that truly belongs to me. The knowledge of what I carried, what I cleaned, what I created. Even if they've forgotten, I haven't. And when I sit here now in this quiet place, with its peeling paint and faint antiseptic scent, I sometimes close my eyes and see that banner I once made. Happy 8th birthday in crooked letters. I remember the smile it brought. I remember the hug. So maybe that's the gift I give myself now, not balloons or cards, but the permission to remember who I was even when they didn't, even when they don't. The sofa no one noticed me on. That's where I used to sit in the evenings after the dishes were done. The homework checked, the toys picked up. I'd lower myself onto that floral cushioned seat like it was the only thing still holding me up. But no one ever really saw me there. Not really. They passed me by chattering about school or work or whose turn it was to take the garbage out. The television blared. The dog barked. The phone rang. But me, I just sat folded into the fabric, like another throw pillow, soft silent, expected to stay in place. I used to knit in those quiet moments. Not for myself, of course. For them. Sweaters, mittens, scarves. I'd pick the colors they liked, patterns I knew they'd use. I remember one winter when I made each of them matching hats. They wore them in the family photo, smiling flushed, standing in the snow. It's framed somewhere, I think. Probably on one of their walls. I wasn't in it. I took the picture. It's strange the way someone can be present in every memory and still be absent from every frame. That sofa became my hiding place, my little island of stillness in a house always moving. I learned to sink into it, to disappear without leaving. If I closed my eyes, I could pretend they saw me, that they would turn and say, "Come join us." But they never did. I was the background, the steady hum that held their lives together. You only notice the hum when it stops. And I never stopped. I didn't know how. There was one night I remember it so clearly when my daughter came in crying. She'd been hurt something with school or friends I can't remember now. She collapsed beside me, buried her face in my lap. I stroked her hair, whispered that it would be okay, and for a moment, I felt like I mattered again. But even then, it wasn't about me. It was about what I could absorb. I was the sponge, the warm lap, the place tears went to dry. I never asked for anything in return, not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid that if I did, they wouldn't know how to give it. And what then? What do you do when the people you love can't love you back in the ways you need? You stop asking. You sit on the sofa with your knitting and your aching back and your fading hope. You smile when they walk past. You laugh at their stories. You listen, always listening. And when the house grows quiet and everyone has gone to bed, you turn off the lamp and climb into your own quiet loneliness. I think part of me believed that one day they'd look back and see it all, the quiet sacrifices, the invisible labor, the way I held everything together with a smile and a cup of tea. But time doesn't rewind, and people don't always reflect. They just go on living the lives you helped build without looking back to see who laid the foundation. Now in this place, I have a new sofa. It's smaller, stiffer. There are no crumbs tucked into the cushions, no half-folded laundry resting on the armrest. It's clean, sterile, empty. I sit on it some evenings looking out the window at the parking lot, wondering if someone might visit. They usually don't. But here's what I've learned. The sofa may be empty, but I don't have to be. I started knitting again, not for them, for me. Bright yarn, wild patterns. I even made myself a shawl, something soft and indulgent and utterly unnecessary. And every time I pull it over my shoulders, I remember that I'm still here. I still deserve to feel warm. Sometimes I imagine the old sofa, the one in the house I raised them in, still holding my shape, still waiting for me to come back. But I won't. That version of me, the one who stayed small so they could grow, she's resting now. And this new me, this quieter, wiser version, she doesn't need to be noticed to exist. She sees herself. And that's something I never thought I'd say. The box of broken jewelry. That's what I found when I moved here, tucked deep in the back of an old drawer beneath expired coupons and brittle rubber bands. A little velvet box once red but now faded to something closer to dust. Inside were bits and pieces, a chain with no clasp, a single earring, a ring I hadn't worn since the arthritis made my fingers swell. And then beneath it all, my wedding set, the band and the diamond small, but once radiant, now dulled from years of dishwater and forgotten anniversaries. I stared at them for a long time. It felt like looking at someone else's life. The woman who wore those rings believed in promises. She believed in building something that would last. She stood by her husband through layoffs, through long nights, through things she never dared to talk about with anyone else. And when things got tight, which they often did, she gave what she had, even when it was all she had. I remember the night I pawned the engagement ring. The car needed repairs. One of the kids was starting school, and the bills had piled up like winter snow, quiet heavy, threatening to bury us. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked into that shop on Main Street, slid the ring across the counter, and told the man I didn't need it anymore. He gave me $200. I used it to fix the car and buy new shoes for our son. He never knew. None of them did. No one ever asked where the ring had gone. No one noticed the bare patch on my finger. I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't in jewelry. It was in the everyday sacrifices. The dinners made, the shirts ironed, the gentle way I touched his shoulder when he looked lost. But still it hurt. Not the giving, the forgetting. That's what I've come to understand. It's not the sacrifices that break you. It's the silence that follows. The way they carry on, not realizing something has gone missing. That you've gone missing. I think about that ring sometimes. I wonder where it ended up. On another hand, melted down into something new. I used to imagine someone wearing it, never knowing it once represented a promise I tried so hard to keep. A lifetime poured into quiet, unseen moments. He told me once, years later, I don't remember you ever being into jewelry. I smiled, nodded. Of course. Why would he remember the ring he placed on my finger? Why would he remember the girl who believed it meant forever? Now I wear nothing, no rings, no tokens, just the soft fabric of this place, the loose sleeves, the cardigans, the pockets, where I sometimes still keep hard candies out of habit. I touch my fingers sometimes where the ring used to rest. There's still a little groove there, skin pressed into memory, a mark no one can see but me. I've come to think of that box of broken jewelry as something sacred, not sad, not anymore, just true, like an altar to the life I lived, the pieces I gave, the sparkle that faded not because it wasn't real, but because it was worn from loving too hard, from holding too much. Some days I open that box just to feel the weight of those pieces in my palm. They're cold at first, but then they warm up just like I used to, slowly, with patience, with love. I think maybe that's what I was all along, a woman who warmed up the world, even if no one noticed where the heat came from. They don't ask about jewelry now. They don't ask about much. The visits are sparse, the conversations thinner each time, but I still have that box, and in it the quiet proof that I was here, that I gave, that I loved. And maybe that's enough. A voice that never interrupted. That's what mine became. I wasn't born quiet. As a girl, I was bold, full of chatter and questions and ideas. I would speak over people, sometimes too loudly, with the reckless excitement of someone who hadn't yet learned the weight of being dismissed. But life slowly and methodically taught me. It taught me that silence was safer, that holding my tongue meant keeping the peace, that speaking up only led to eye rolls, sighs, or worse, that subtle tightening in someone's face when they were done listening but too polite to say so. So I folded myself up, word by word, opinion by opinion. I became the nod, the the whatever you think is best, My voice became something I saved for necessary things, grocery lists, gentle reminders, bedtime stories. Never for disagreement, never for asking for more. I remember one Thanksgiving years ago when the kids were grown and the house was full again. I tried to tell a story, something funny from work, back when I still had a job outside the house. I got 2 sentences in before someone laughed over me about something else. I waited thinking they'd come back to me, that someone would say, "Sorry, Mom, what were you saying?" But no one did. So I swallowed it, just like I'd swallowed so many stories before. That night I stood at the sink washing dishes with my sleeves rolled up and tears pricking my eyes. Not because the story was important, but because I realized how invisible I'd become. I wasn't the center of anyone's attention anymore. I was the wall, the structure, the thing holding up the room so everyone else could live freely inside it. Even my opinions, once sharp, once hopeful, dulled with time. I used to want things. I had thoughts about politics, art, what we should name the baby. But I learned that my views complicated things. They made people uncomfortable. So I let others choose. I told myself it was kindness, that I was being easy, that love meant yielding. But love without voice is not partnership. It's servitude in disguise. The strange thing is, people don't notice when you go quiet. They think you're content. They call you patient, wise even. They admire how low maintenance you are. But inside it feels like erasure, like being slowly erased from the story you helped write. Even now in this place, I find myself staying quiet. I don't complain about the cold food or the noisy hallway. I thank the nurses when they're late. I smile when I'm overlooked. It's a reflex now, second nature, like flinching from a sharp word even when it doesn't come. But in the silence of these walls, I've started listening differently, not to others, to myself, to the voice I buried so long ago. She's faint, but she's there. She remembers things I've forgotten, what I loved, what I hoped for, what I wanted to say. The other day during our group activity, a young volunteer asked what we would do differently if we could relive our lives. Most people laughed or gave soft, wistful answers. I'd travel more. I'd say yes to dancing. And then it was my turn. For a moment I hesitated, but then I said it. I would speak more, not louder, just more. There was a pause in the room, a stillness, as if something had landed, and for the first time in a long time they listened. They really listened, not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't flinch when I used it. Afterward, one of the aides told me that what I said stayed with her, that she hadn't called her own mother in weeks. She promised she would. I don't know if she did, but for once my words rippled outward, and that was enough. I'm learning slowly to give my voice back to myself, even if there's no one around to hear it. I speak out loud sometimes now when I'm alone in my room. I read books aloud, hum songs I used to know. I say my own name just to remind myself I exist, outside of their memories. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe I don't need to interrupt anyone to be heard. Maybe I just need to stop interrupting myself. The quiet of sacrifice. That's what I lived in. Not the dramatic kind of sacrifice, not the ones in movies where someone rushes into a burning building or makes some grand, teary-eyed gesture. No, mine was the kind you couldn't see, the kind that folds into daily life so completely that even I stopped recognizing it. It looked like choosing a cheaper brand, and so there'd be enough left for piano lessons. It sounded like laughter at a joke that stung. It felt like shelving dreams, like books I never meant to read again. There was a time I wanted to be a teacher. I remember how much joy it gave me to help someone understand something for the first time, to watch confusion melt into confidence. I took a few classes part-time after the kids were born. I had a little folder of lesson plans, articles. I loved a half-written essay on the importance of storytelling in early education. It still exists somewhere in a box, probably labeled Mom's Stuff. But when my husband's job became unpredictable and the bills grew teeth, I tucked that folder away. I told myself I could go back to it later when things settled. They never did. There was always someone who needed me more than I needed myself. That's the thing about women like me. We don't set out to disappear. We vanish slowly through small decisions made with big hearts. And no one tells you you're vanishing. They thank you. They call you amazing. They marvel at how you do it all. And you start to believe that maybe this is enough, this quiet, endless giving. But inside, a part of you waits for the day when someone might ask, "What did you give up?" Waits for someone to say, "Let's make space for your dreams now." That day never came for me, and eventually I stopped waiting. What they don't tell you about sacrifice is that it doesn't end. Once you begin, the world keeps asking. And if you keep saying yes, it assumes you'll never say no. I said yes. So many times I forgot what no sounded like in my mouth. I think that's why when the decision was made, when they told me gently that maybe the nursing home was best, I didn't protest. I nodded. I packed a small bag. I let them take me. And then I watched as the door to my home, my real home, the one I made for them, closed behind me. There's a different kind of silence here. It's not the silence of waiting for someone to finish talking so I can speak. It's not the silence of exhaustion after a long day. It's the silence of absence, of no one needing you, of no one asking. It's what happens when the sacrifices are over and the audience has left and the stage is empty and you're still there holding all the costumes. Sometimes I wonder who I would have been if I had chosen differently, if I had said just once, "No, I won't cancel that class," or "No, I can't watch the kids tonight, I have a dream I'm chasing." But those words felt selfish at the time. Now they feel like lifelines I never reached for. Don't get me wrong, I loved my family. I still do. But love, I've learned, shouldn't require vanishing. It shouldn't leave you sitting in a quiet room with nothing but old dreams for company. Still, I find comfort in small things. A well-made bed, the way morning light pools on the floor, the feel of a warm cup of tea in my hands, not made for anyone else, just for me. And in these quiet moments, I talk to that younger version of me, the one who wanted to teach, the one who loved poetry and collecting stones and dreamed of traveling alone one day. I tell her I'm sorry. I tell her I see her now. I tell her I didn't forget. Maybe no one asked what I gave up, but I know. And maybe that's where healing starts, not with someone else's apology, but with my own permission to grieve what I buried. And maybe if I can do that, I can start to unbury the rest. The phone that never rang. That was the first real shock after I moved in. Not the beige walls, or the scheduled meals, or the soft shuffle of slippers in the hallway. It was the silence of that little white phone by the window. I stared at it the first night, certain it would ring. It had to. I had told them I'd arrived. I had smiled during the goodbye, told them I'd be fine, that they didn't have to worry. But inside I was certain, so certain that one of them would call, that they'd want to know how I was settling in, if I needed anything, if the room was warm enough. But it didn't ring that night, or the next. Days became weeks. I kept checking the receiver, picking it up just to hear the dial tone, just to make sure it worked. I told myself they were busy, that they'd call on the weekend, that something must have come up. But by the third week, I stopped pretending. They weren't calling, not because they didn't care. I still can't believe that completely, but because their lives had simply moved on. And I was no longer part of the movement. I tried calling once, just to say hello. The phone rang 8 times before it went to voicemail. I left a short message, said I was doing okay, said the food wasn't terrible, said I missed them. I never got a call back. Maybe they listened. Maybe they meant to reply. Maybe they forgot. I used to sit by the phone on Sundays. That was our tradition, wasn't it? Sunday check-ins. I'd cook a roast, and they'd call each of them with their own story, the new job, the new baby, the little annoyances of life that somehow made me feel included. I'd stir gravy with the phone tucked under my chin, listening and laughing, feeling like the heart of something that still beat. Now Sundays are just quiet. They serve roast here too sometimes, but it tastes like memory stretched too thin, overcooked, under-seasoned. I sit by the window and watch the parking lot, counting the cars that don't stop for me. There's a woman down the hall whose daughter calls every day. She walks slowly with her cordless phone, smiling as she listens. She's older than me, more frail, but her voice lights up when she says, "She called again," and I nod and smile and tell her that's lovely. But inside, a part of me wilts. I wasn't expecting fanfare, just a phone call, a moment, a voice on the other end saying, "How are you, Mom? Is that too much after everything?" After the birthdays, the holidays, the nights, I stayed up worrying the mornings I spent ironing uniforms and making breakfasts. They never finished. One phone call, that's all I wanted. It's not even about the conversation. I don't need long stories or heartfelt confessions. I just want to be remembered, not because I reminded them, not because it was on their to-do list, but because they missed me, because something in their day felt off without my voice. But I've stopped sitting by the phone now. I still hear it ring sometimes, not for me, but for others, and every time it does, I flinch a little, just a twitch in the fingers, a heartbeat that holds its breath, then nothing. So I've started talking to myself, out loud, quietly. I narrate my day, tell myself little jokes, recall old recipes. Sometimes I even answer questions no one asked. It sounds strange, but it helps. I think maybe it's not the silence that hurts. It's waiting for someone else to break it. Now I break it myself. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing looks like. Not a grand reconciliation, not a sudden burst of attention, but learning how to sit in your own quiet and speak anyway. Even if no one listens, even if the phone never rings. Because I still have a voice. I still have something to say. And if they never hear it, at least I finally did. A mother without a place. That's what I became the day I tried to visit. It wasn't planned. I was out on a supervised outing. They take us to the pharmacy once a month. Let us walk a bit, if the weather allows. And as the aide helped me into the van, something inside me stirred, something reckless and hopeful. I asked if we could take a detour, just a short one. I gave the driver an address. I hadn't spoken aloud in months. My daughter's house. The same house I once helped clean when they first moved in, scrubbing baseboards with aching knees and smiling anyway. The neighborhood looked the same. Trimmed lawns, plastic mailboxes, wind chimes singing in the breeze. But the house had changed, new paint, a new car in the driveway, curtains drawn tight. I walked up the path slowly, hand trailing over the flowers I once planted, marigolds. They were blooming golden and bright, though not as carefully tended as they used to be. I knocked. Once, twice. A pause. Then the door opened. She looked surprised, not angry, not upset, just unsettled, like I had stepped out of a photograph and onto her porch. She smiled a little too tight and said, "Oh, Mom, I wish you'd called. This isn't a good time." I stood there smiling back like I hadn't heard her, but I had. I heard every syllable, every polite dagger. I looked past her into the house. It was full. I could see movement, voices behind walls. Her husband, the grandkids, A party maybe, or just a Saturday. I'd never know. She stepped out gently and pulled the door halfway closed behind her, like she didn't want the inside to spill out and reach me. I said I just wanted to say hello, see how she was. She nodded. Said they'd come visit soon. I nodded too. What else was I supposed to do? Beg for a seat at the table I once set. I shuffled back to the van, the air heavier than when I'd arrived. The aide helped me in her eyes, kind but careful. She didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. On the ride back, I stared out the window and thought about all the rooms I'd once belonged to. The kitchens where I stirred pots and stirred peace. The living rooms where I calmed tantrums and tucked in blankets. The hallways where I hung their coats, their artwork, their pride. I had built those homes. I had made them warm. I had filled them with comfort. Now I wasn't even allowed to pass through the threshold. That moment being turned away gently, sweetly, like someone who meant well, but no longer fit, it carved something out of me. I didn't cry. Not then. I just felt this slow closing inside like a book no one wanted to finish reading. Back at the home, I sat in my room for hours, didn't eat, didn't speak, just watched the sunlight move across the wall, remembering the days when I was someone you dropped everything to greet, when I was the welcome, not the interruption. The worst part wasn't the rejection. It was how unsurprising it felt. I've become a visitor to the life I created, a guest at the table of my own legacy. And yet, in some twisted way, I'm still expected to be grateful. Grateful for the occasional call, the framed photo someone remembered to bring last Christmas. The way they still call me Mom, but not in a voice that says, I need you, only I remember you used to be important. But I won't visit again. I won't wait outside doors that no longer open for me. That's a dignity I can keep. That's a boundary I can build with what's left of my heart. Instead, I've placed a small frame on my bedside table, a picture of that same house, back when it was new with us standing in front, smiling arms around each other. Before I became a burden, before they learned how to live without me. I look at it sometimes, not out of bitterness, just to remind myself that once I was the center of that story. And no matter how far they drift, nothing erases that truth. I was a mother. I gave everything, and for a time I was everything. Now I am still here, maybe not welcome in their homes, but finally learning to welcome myself back into my own heart. Nursing Home Orientation Day, that's what they called it, like it was some sort of cheerful transition, like I was checking into a summer camp for slow bodies and soft memories. There were brochures on the table, glossy photos of smiling seniors, playing cards of staff in pastel uniforms offering gentle help. I looked down at my own hands, thin and spotted, and I remember thinking, I don't feel like someone in a brochure. The drive there had been quiet. My son picked me up in his car, a sleek thing with a dashboard I didn't understand, and music I couldn't hear. We didn't talk much. I asked about the grandkids. He answered. I asked about his wife. He answered. Then silence. The kind that feels like both of you are trying not to say something. I stared out the window as we drove, past the grocery store I used to shop at, the park where I pushed a stroller in the late afternoons, the diner where I used to meet a friend every other Thursday for coffee, my life flickering by like background scenery in someone else's movie. When we arrived, he parked too close to the curb and mumbled something about tight schedules. He helped me out of the car gently but quickly, and I stood on the sidewalk as he pulled my suitcase from the trunk. It was just one small bag. He asked if I had everything. I nodded. Of course I did. I'd left everything else behind years ago, little by little, with every compromise, every yes, that meant saying no to myself. We walked through the automatic doors together. The air smelled like something trying too hard to be clean. A woman at the front desk smiled, handed us a folder, and began explaining policies, meal plans, visiting hours, emergency procedures. Her voice was kind, efficient, like a flight attendant showing me how to prepare for impact. They walked me through the halls, pointing things out. That's the activity room. Here's the nurse's station. You can decorate your door if you like. I nodded, smiled, listened. Inside, I felt like a child on the first day of school, except no one was waiting at the end of the hallway to hug me. Then they showed me the room. It was small. A twin bed, a dresser, a shared bathroom, neutral walls, neutral carpet. Everything designed not to offend, not to overwhelm a space built for people expected to shrink. There was a woman already on the other side watching television. She looked over, smiled briefly, then turned back to her program. I stood there, unsure what to do with myself, with my suitcase, with my presence. My son stood awkwardly in the doorway. He cleared his throat and said, "They'll take good care of you here." I nodded. Of course they would. That wasn't the point. I think he knew it too. He hugged me quick, one-armed, like he was late for something, and then he left. Just like that. I didn't walk him out. I didn't watch the car drive away. I just sat down on the bed, my hands resting on my lap, and tried to breathe in this new air. Later that day, a nurse came by to introduce herself, take my vitals, go over my medications. She was kind, young, tired. I wanted to ask her how her day had been, if she liked working here, but I didn't. I was too busy trying not to cry. Orientation day, that's what they called it. But nothing prepared me for the grief. Not just the grief of leaving a house, a neighborhood, a life, but the grief of realizing how smoothly the world moves on without you. How easily the people you raised can set you down like a worn-out coat. No one did anything cruel. No one yelled. No one pushed me out the door. But sometimes betrayal doesn't come with bruises. Sometimes it comes in the form of quiet decisions made without you, for you by people who once looked to you for everything. I unpacked that night slowly, folded my clothes into the drawer, placed a photo of the kids on the nightstand, opened the small box of jewelry, not to wear anything, just to see it again. My roommate fell asleep with the TV on. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter from another room, laughter I wasn't part of. That was day one. And though I tried to be strong, to be grateful, to find silver linings, I remember whispering into the dark, "I don't belong here." But no one answered. I fell asleep with my glasses on, clutching the hem of my sweater, like it could carry me home. Room 214, meal plan included. That's how they described it on the paperwork, like it was part of a vacation package. A nice tidy number. A place to be filed, scheduled, checked on. Room 214. Not Mom's room. Not her little corner of the world. Just a number with a twin bed, a window that faced the parking lot, and a small chair no one ever sat in but me. They wheeled me in after the tour, my suitcase balanced awkwardly across my lap. I could have walked. I still had enough strength back then. But the nurse insisted, saying it would be easier for whom I didn't ask. My roommate wasn't there. Her side of the room was neat, untouched, like a hotel waiting for its next guest. I sat in the chair by the window while they went over the meal options again. Standard breakfast, optional lunch entrees, soft dinner choices for those with trouble chewing. I nodded, trying to remember everything, but none of it stuck. The only thing I could focus on was the feeling, the cold, hollow weight of being left behind. They set my suitcase by the bed, handed me a laminated menu, and said I could press the red button if I needed anything. Then they left. The door clicked shut behind them, like punctuation. I sat there for a long time. The chair creaked under me. The room hummed with the sound of the heater, and somewhere down the hall someone was coughing that dry, shallow cough of the elderly, the kind that makes you wince. I pressed my hands together in my lap. They felt small, fragile, like they no longer belonged to the woman who had once juggled 5 things at once, stirring a pot with one hand and braiding hair with the other. I opened the suitcase eventually. It felt strange, not like arriving, more like unpacking grief one blouse at a time. I placed my nightgown in the drawer, set my slippers beside the bed. A tiny part of me hoped one of them would call, just to check in, just to ask how the room was. But no one did. Dinner that night came on a tray. A woman with tired eyes brought it in with a quiet knock and a rushed, "Here you go." It was meatloaf, mashed potatoes, canned green beans, a square of gelatin in a plastic cup. I looked at it for a while before eating. It wasn't that it tasted bad, it was that it tasted like being forgotten, like someone feeding a body without remembering the person living inside it. I used to make meatloaf every Thursday. I had a secret recipe, added shredded carrots to keep it moist, a dash of paprika. No one ever noticed, but always tasted. The kids hated the carrots until they were older. Then they asked for the recipe, said it reminded them of home. That night in room 214, I thought about those Thursday dinners. I thought about the way their faces used to light up when they smelled it from the driveway. The way we used to all sit together, even if only for 20 minutes. Now I eat on a tray, alone, at a plastic table that sticks to my elbows if I lean too long. I chew slowly, not because I want to savor it, but because I don't want it to end. The meal is the only part of the day where I feel even remotely occupied. After dinner, I wrote a letter. Not a real one, just something in my journal. I wrote, "I am still here." Just that, over and over, like a prayer, or maybe a declaration. I don't know who I was saying it to, myself perhaps, or maybe the walls. Room 214 isn't home. It never will be. But I've lined the windowsill with things that remember me, a small photo of the kids, a dried flower from the day they dropped me off, a paperweight shaped like a heart that I once kept on the kitchen windowsill to hold down the grocery list. I keep them where I can see them, because sometimes the world forgets. But I won't. I can't. Each night before I go to bed, I turn out the light, pull the blanket up to my chin, and whisper to the darkness, "You are more than this room." I don't know if it helps, but it's something. A small ritual to remind myself that somewhere beneath the label, the paperwork, the schedule, and the silence, I still exist. Not just as room 214, as me, the woman in the mirror. That's who greeted me one morning, not a stranger, not quite, but someone I hadn't properly looked at in years. It was early. The halls were still quiet sunlight, just beginning to stretch across the linoleum floors. I shuffled into the bathroom, brushed my hair like I always did, and caught a glimpse of her. Pale skin loose around the jaw, eyes tired but still curious. And for some reason that morning I stopped. I really looked. She looked older than I remembered, not just in years, but in wear. Like a book left out in the rain, the pages still legible, but water-stained and soft around the edges. I leaned in closer as if proximity could return something that had slipped away, and I whispered, "When did we stop recognizing each other?" I used to have a face full of motion, expressions that moved like wind across water, bright eyes, flushed cheeks from rushing around to meet everyone's needs. I saw it in photos once, back when there were still new pictures of me. Now the only photos I get are ones of others. The grandkids in soccer uniforms, someone's dog in a Christmas sweater. They never include me. Maybe they don't think I'd want to see myself. Maybe they just don't think of it. But that morning in the quiet, I looked, not to judge, not to mourn, just to acknowledge, to say you're still here. I reached for my face cream, the same kind I've used for decades, and gently massaged it in slow, deliberate. It wasn't about vanity. It was about touch, about care, about giving something back to the body that held everyone else for so long. I touched the lines on my forehead, the folds near my mouth, the way one eyelid droops a little more than the other now. And I thought of every time I put someone else's needs above my own, every night I stayed awake with a fevered child, every day I skipped lunch, because there wasn't enough for everyone, every plan I shelved because someone else needed a ride or a check or just my time. And I thought, no wonder she looks tired, but also no wonder she's still standing. They say we become invisible with age. That's only half true. We become easy to ignore, but we don't disappear. We are still here beneath the skin, beneath the silence, beneath the years of holding everyone else up. And sometimes the only one who sees us is the reflection that waits patiently each morning, hoping we'll finally look back. I sat by the mirror that day longer than I meant to. I brushed my hair slowly all the way through. I tied it up with the blue ribbon I used to wear when I was younger. No one saw me. No one commented. But I did it anyway, for myself. Later that afternoon, one of the aides stopped and said, "You look nice today." Just that. Simple. But it landed, not because of the ribbon, but because for a fleeting second I felt seen, not useful, not responsible, just visible. That night I took out my old compact, the one I kept in my purse for years, and I looked again. The woman in the mirror wasn't young. She wasn't glamorous, but she had survived. She had held a family together. She had kissed foreheads and packed lunches and buried dreams without fanfare. And now she was learning how to see herself again, not as the aftermath, not as what was left, but as someone still becoming. I started leaving a small note by the mirror each night. Just one line. Sometimes it's, "You were kind today." Sometimes it's, "You didn't flinch." Sometimes it's simply, "Good job." I don't know why it helps, but it does. I think the woman in the mirror deserves to hear those things, even if the only voice saying them is her own. Maybe especially then. Because if I've learned anything, it's this: the world may forget what we looked like. It may stop seeing us. But we don't have to stop seeing ourselves. And today, for the first time in a long time, I did. An envelope with no return address. That was my quiet experiment. My little test to see if I still lived somewhere inside their thoughts. It was my grandson's birthday, the youngest one. He was turning 8, I think, or maybe 9. The dates blur now like fogged glass, but I remembered it because I always do. I had written every birthday into a small pocket calendar, the one with flowers on the cover, and even though I don't always remember what day it is here, I remember theirs. I sat at the little desk in my room and pulled out one of the cards I keep stashed in the drawer. Blue balloons, generic, but cheerful. Inside I wrote a simple note. "Happy birthday, wishing you laughter cake and all the wonder your heart can hold." I didn't sign it. I didn't want to make it about me. I just wanted to know if he'd recognize something in the words, a feeling, a familiarity, something that said, "This is from someone who loves you." I slipped in a $20 bill, crisp new, folded neatly, and then I sealed the envelope carefully, writing his name and address. But not mine, no return address. I wanted to see what happened when the gift had no strings, no obligation, just presence. A week passed, then another. No call, no mention. I asked once lightly during a rare phone conversation with my daughter how the birthday went. She said it was lovely. They had a party at a trampoline park. He got lots of gifts. I asked if he'd received a card. In the mail. She paused, then said, "Oh, maybe. There were a few. I think one was from a neighbor." And just like that, my small, trembling offering folded itself into obscurity, swallowed up by busy lives and unopened envelopes. That night I lay awake with a strange ache, not anger, not even sadness exactly, just a weight, like something had been handed back to me, unopened, unneeded. You see, I didn't send that card for thanks. I didn't even send it expecting recognition. I sent it hoping for proof that I still echo in their lives, even if faintly, that my love, though faded at the edges, still finds them. It's a strange thing growing older how you become a ghost in the places you once built, how your presence becomes optional, polite, dispensable. When they were little, I never missed a birthday. I'd make cakes shaped like dinosaurs, wrap gifts in ribbons I curled with scissors, sing louder than anyone else. Their joy was my oxygen. I breathed it in, thinking it would always tether us. But now I float, outside the frame, outside the moment, sending gifts like signals from a distant planet, hoping someone will look up and wonder. I still send cards. I've decided I won't stop. But now I write them with a different purpose. Not to be remembered, but to remember myself, to honor the part of me that still shows up, still gives, still hopes. And I no longer wait for calls that never come. I light a candle on their birthdays, whisper a wish into the flame, and let it go. Not for them, for me. Because love doesn't vanish just because it isn't acknowledged. Sometimes it lives in the unanswered, the unopened, the unnoticed. And maybe one day he'll come across that card in a box of old things. Maybe he'll unfold it, touch the handwriting, and something will stir a feeling, a scent, a memory with no name. And maybe, just maybe, he'll whisper, "Grandma." And maybe that will be enough. The secret stash of chocolates. That's what I keep now, tucked away in the bottom drawer of my bedside table, beneath a stack of old magazines and a pair of wool socks. I didn't always do things like that. For years I was the one who rationed the sweets, who made sure the kids didn't eat too much sugar, who saved the last piece for someone else. I don't know how many times I gave up the only slice of cake I'd been looking forward to, just to hear, "Mom, can I have yours?" And I always said yes. That became my habit, not just with desserts, but with everything. The warmest blanket, the last cookie, the front seat, the right to be tired. It all went to someone else. Always someone else. I thought that's what made me good, selfless, loving, a proper mother, a proper wife. But now I buy the good chocolate, the expensive kind, dark and rich, wrapped in crinkly gold foil. I don't tell anyone, not because I'm hiding it out of shame, but because it's mine. My tiny rebellion, my sweet melting proof that I still matter. I eat one after dinner most nights. I unwrap it slowly, listen to the quiet rustle like it's a secret only the walls and I know, and I let it rest on my tongue. No rushing, no sharing. Just me and that deep, bitter sweetness. It reminds me I'm still allowed pleasure, still allowed to savor. It's funny, really, how many years I spent waiting for permission, to rest, to speak, to want. I didn't even realize I was waiting. I thought I was just being a mother, a wife, a daughter. I thought being last was the price you paid for being loved. But love doesn't ask you to disappear. I've been reading again, too. Not the books they gave me about aging or grief or finding joy in small spaces. I mean real stories, messy stories. Stories with women who want things, who make mistakes, who scream and laugh and eat entire boxes of chocolates without guilt. Sometimes I stay up too late with the lamp on reading until my eyes ache. It feels like stealing time, like reclaiming something. The aides don't know about the chocolate. If they did, they might warn me about the sugar, the calories, the way it might interfere with my medications. But I don't care. I've spent a lifetime interfering with myself, bending around other people's needs. Now at the end of things, I finally want to stand up straight in my own hunger. Some nights I imagine walking into one of their kitchens, my children's homes gleaming, and new and taking the best chair. Not asking, just sitting, reaching for the fancy chocolates they hide from their kids, unwrapping one without apology. I wonder if they'd see it, if they'd notice the way I finally let myself have something. But I don't need their kitchens anymore. I have mine. Tiny makeshift tucked into a drawer, and every piece I unwrap is a quiet declaration, I'm not done. Not with wanting, not with tasting, not with being. There's a kind of healing that doesn't shout. It doesn't come from forgiveness or closure or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from a piece of chocolate in the dark, from letting it melt slowly without offering anyone a bite. Sometimes the only person who needs to know you're worth the good things is you. And maybe, just maybe, that's where freedom begins. A quiet rebellion. That's what my life has become now, not loud, not angry, but deliberate. I don't raise my voice. I don't argue. I don't beg to be remembered. I simply live slowly on my own terms. Every act that once seemed small, taking my time saying no, choosing what to wear, what to read, what to feel, is now a kind of revolution, a quiet one, but no less powerful. They say this place is peaceful, and in some ways it is. The days are structured, the meals predictable, the air always smells faintly of fabric softener and antiseptic. People come and go, some remember where they are, some don't. Some laugh too loudly in the hallway, others haven't spoken in days. I walk among them now, not as the caretaker, not as the provider, just as another woman with a story behind her eyes. But even here in this hushed world, I've started taking up space, not in grand ways, but in the way I sit a little straighter, in the way I insist on wearing the cardigan I like, even when they suggest something warmer, in the way I leave the last bite of dessert on the plate, not because I'm saving it for someone else, but because I don't owe the plate or the person who cleared it anything. I'm done being consumed. The other day during a music hour, they played an old song I hadn't heard in decades, one of those warm humming tunes that used to drift through the radio while I was ironing shirts or folding towels. I closed my eyes, and I could almost feel the floor beneath my kitchen slippers, the scent of lemon polish, the clatter of a busy home. But then I opened my eyes, and there I was here, in this place, still breathing, still remembering. And I smiled, because even though they placed me here politely, quietly, without fuss, they didn't silence me, not fully, not forever. I eat alone most nights now, not because I have to, but because I want to. I like the table near the window, the one where the sun stretches its fingers across the tabletop at just the right angle. I eat slowly, I taste everything. I let the tea go cold sometimes just so I can reheat it and feel the warmth return. No one rushes me anymore. No one interrupts. It's the first time in my life that I've had a meal entirely for me. No one to feed, no one to serve, just me and the soft clink of utensils and the sound of myself being enough. Some might call it loneliness, but I don't, not anymore. Because in this silence, I've started hearing something I haven't heard in years, my own thoughts uninterrupted, my own desires unfiltered, my own voice saying gently, "You survived." And that's what this is in the end, a survival, not just of the body, but of the self. a quiet, steady rebellion against invisibility, against the notion that worth ends when usefulness does, against the belief that love is something earned only through sacrifice. No, I am still worthy. Even now, especially now. So I sit at this table room 214 meal plan included, and I eat my dinner like a woman claiming something back. I chew slowly. I sip without apology. I wrap my shawl tighter and watch the sunset through the window. And I do not ask to be seen. I simply am. There's a kind of hush that settles in after the final page is turned, after the last light flickers through the curtain. A hush not of absence, but of stillness, of things being as they are, not perfect, not painful, just true. And that's where I live now, not in the house I built or the roles I filled, but in this moment, this breath. I think often of who I used to be, the girl with her hair in braids and a notebook full of dreams, the young mother with grocery lists and scraped knees to kiss the wife folding laundry while wondering if he'd notice her silence. I've been all of them, and I've loved all of them, even when no one else did. But now I am simply a woman, sitting at the end of her story, holding the softness of her own voice like a warm cup of tea. I am no longer trying to be heard. I am listening finally to myself. The silence no longer frightens me. It doesn't mock. It cradles. It tells me I am not forgotten, not by the walls, not by the wind, and certainly not by myself. I am the echo of lullabies once sung, the scent of soup in a childhood kitchen, the hands that held too much and still remained open. And though I sit alone now in a small room with a quiet drawer of chocolates and a folded photograph of younger days, I am not empty. I am full, full of memory, full of love, full of me. They may not come, they may not call, but I am here, and I am enough.